Welcome, lovely one, to the Meant for More podcast. My name's Lisa Clifford, and I am building the world's most empowering Meant for More movement, leading millions of heart-led purpose seekers from feeling insignificant to invincible. So I truly hope you enjoy this next episode. Our next guest is Jules Wyman. Jules is a confidence coach, speaker and trainer. Jules specialises in helping people really understand themselves into a place of truth, true authenticity and growth. Jules shares in this conversation our belief about angels, her trip to Machu Picchu where she had a moment that she's forever grateful for. We talk about our comfort zones. We talk about what it's like to just jack in your job and then try jobs on. But like Goldilocks we talk about. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And thank you for listening. And welcome to lovely Jules Wyman. And Jules, I'm so happy that you're here with us and having this fabulous, well, I know it's going to be fabulous conversation, setting you up.
No pressure.
You're ready for your launch. And let me ask you if you would be happy to share a wonderful time in your life, or maybe it's not been so wonderful time in your life where you had that meant for more moments, where you knew you were meant for more and you took action with it.
It's thank you for inviting me, first of all, Lisa. I really appreciate being here. I think I've been really thinking about this because obviously I knew that I was doing this today, and I know what your whole question around meant for more. And there's so many little things that I'm like, oh, that was a little inkling about being meant for more, and then that was a little one, and that was a little one. So there's two really that came together without me realizing it, that then led me to take an action, but the action was much further down the line. So I know it was in August, and I know it was after a bank holiday weekend, and I know that the relationship that I was in at that point was not fun, probably for both of us, to be fair. And it had been absolutely pants from my perspective. And I remember this is the days when people used to buy newspapers every weekend. And I remember I'd bought the newspaper and I'd been looking through it, and I'd spotted this advert to do something which at that time was fairly new. It's very common these days, but it was one of those charity hikes. And it was to Machu Picchu. And something about it really stood out. Now, I'd always wanted to go to Peru, and I think it was two things. One, I loved Paddington Bear as a child, so that planted that seed. And also, I was really intrigued by the Incas because we did something around it at school, and there was also a cartoon on at that time when I was a child that was about the Incas and gold and the conquistadors and all that thing. And I think it just planted something. So that jumped out at me. But I was working as a stage manager at that point in my life, and you didn't really get to take time off. You were either working or not working. And so when you were working, you had money, but when you weren't working, you didn't have the money, or I didn't have the money. But I remember going into work on that Tuesday after the bank holiday Monday and showing this. One of the actors I was working with, he said, "Oh, how was your bank holiday weekend?" And I was like, "It was awful." Explained why and was in floods of tears. And I pulled this advert out and I went, "But I saw this and I don't know what to do about it." And he looked at it and he said, "Would you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, something's kind of nudging me, calling me to go." I was terrible, didn't have the money, so I would have had to fundraise the whole lot. And I think it was like £2,500, which to me seemed like £1 million at that point. It was huge. I didn't even know where to start. I wasn't fit. I hadn't done any exercise since school. And I remember him saying to me, and his dad is a very well-known celebrity in the UK, and I'd also worked with his dad as well. And he said to me, "I'm just going to phone my dad." And he went off and he phoned his dad, and he said, "Well, Dad said he'll give you 100 quid to get you going." And I hadn't even booked it at this point. And I was absolutely in awe that somebody was prepared to do that for me. Why would they do that for me? So I booked it. And then if we cut to, I mean, I could tell you so many stories about that anyway, but we cut to, there was a specific thing that after the charity trek I stayed on, and I traveled around Peru with one of the other ladies that was on the trek. And one of the things that we did was we went to the I can't remember the name of the area, but it's where all the condors are flying around. And you go very early in the morning and you go and sit and wait for the condors to come down on the thermals and go through the valley. And I remember being sat with this woman I just met on the trip there in a van. And her and I, Scottish lady, Honor, if you're listening to this, this is my thank you to you, even though I have said it many times. And she worked for Shell at that point, and she was very successful. There was a few years age gap, but not massively. And she was traveling around the world for a year. And I'd never met anybody that was doing something like that with that amount of freedom. And I remember us being sat, just the two of us on this mountain, waiting for the condors to come down. And I don't even know what we were talking about. I was obviously just talking about my work. And she said something that I was like, sorry, what did you just say? She said, you do know that you can do more than that. And I was like, what you on about? I'm not really qualified in anything else. And she said, look, I've only met you for a few hours, but even I know that somebody would pay you a lot more than you're being paid. You've got so many more smarts about you. I think you maybe want to think about it. And it was about a year and a half later when I handed my notice in to leave the theatre. And there were a lot of things all came together at once. But that comment, which to her was probably I know it was a very throwaway thing because I've said it to her. It's the first time really from a work context in particular that somebody had said to me, you're worth more than that, you could do more than that, And it just got me thinking in a different way. Now, when I left, I didn't just leave that particular job. I actually left show business full stop and said I never want to work in it again. I had no plan. I didn't even have a purr. I had nothing. I had no idea. I was massively in debt and I had zero clue as to what I was going to do. I just knew it was the right thing to do.
What a leap.
Absolutely. And I don't even know if I would have described it as that at the time. And weirdly, both my parents are very risk averse people. But when I told them that I was leaving and that I'd had enough, they didn't know about all the other stuff that was going on in the background, but they actually said, okay. And I was really surprised.
Because usually parents would be wanting you to have your plan B and C already activated before you let go of plan A. And so what happened then? I mean, that sounds like a lot of away from motivation.
Yeah.
Did you have any towards motivation lined up, any inkling? What did you do? You left, and then what?
I left, and then I was not in a great mental state. Met the man that I married a week after I left, which no disrespect to him or I at that time, but I think that was a safety call of going, someone to cling to, because I'd left this world that I'd known for 10 years. And then what I did was I started doing temping jobs because I thought I was only qualified. The only thing that I had on a piece of paper to say I was qualified in something was stage management. That was all my 10 years of experience. And I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, even though I was in my 30s by this point.
So I think to eject a second though, what
Yeah.
I notice about our jobs in our 20s, they become our life, don't they? Because of the unusual hours, you were in stage, I was in hospitality. And the people you work with become your friends,
Yeah.
and you become very immersed in your environment, the people around you. So when you left a life, didn't
Everything.
you?
Yep.
Really, it's a life. It isn't just a job, and that's Yeah, feels like a massive leap of faith. So you clung
Yeah,
to this man.
I clung to this man, but I think that that's, and it's important to recognise as well that the mobile phones did exist, but we didn't use them in the way that we do today. So there was no social media connections. So I wasn't in touch with anybody unless I bumped into them. All my communication with people, as I mean, it's a very transient world that I lived in anyway, was by letter,
Yeah.
snail mail. So it was this in retrospect a really nice limbo state.
Mm,
And I was testing it. I was always very curious about the spiritual world. I didn't know personal development, genuinely didn't know personal development existed, but spirituality stuff I'd been doing for probably about 10, 15 years prior to that anyway, in various dabblements. So I went and did a Reiki course, and I was going to different events and looking to quote unquote fix myself.
mm,
Um, and I suppose that roughly 2 years from leaving theatre to then qualifying as a coach was an exploration. And I think I was I certainly wouldn't have labeled it this way. So I'm looking at it in hindsight. I think it was a time of experimenting. So that's why I started to go and do temping jobs, whether it was waitressing or I worked in a children's nursery, I worked in a call center. So yes, I apologize. I was that person that phoned you whilst you were having your dinner saying, could you do a survey? I apologize to everybody. That was me.
we
Um,
probably need to apologise back for hanging up. And the
oh,
apology
believe me.
lies with us.
That, it was such an interesting experience. Without realizing it, I learned rapport skills. Nobody was teaching me rapport skills. But from the moment someone picked up the phone, I quickly learned how to. There was two things I took away from that role, and I did it for quite a long time. Was those rapport skills to how to navigate the script that I've been given, but actually to the person who's answering the phone. But also, I think it also taught me a lot of patience.
In what way does telesales teach patience?
Well,
Because
I suppose actually, let me change that. Rather than patience, it taught me not to take somebody's reaction to me calling them personally.
that's powerful. God, how helpful is that in life?
Oh my gosh, because I honestly, there were times when I remember one particular instance where one guy absolutely lost his shizzle at me and used some very colourful language. And I had to, I was so, I must have looked like a rabbit in the headlights of going, sorry, pardon, sorry. I don't think they're appropriate words. And one of my colleagues who was much younger than I was, and he was a student, and I remember him just kind of like a cartoon, just going red from the base upwards, and it basically looked like steam was going to come out of his ears. And as I hung up the phone, I kind of sat there in a little bit of shock to kind of compose myself, going, "Oh, that was a bit intense. He's got a lot going through my head." And my colleague was like, "What's his number? I'm phoning him back. How dare he speak to you like that? How dare?" And I was like, "It's okay. He's fine. He's obviously got some stuff going on." And that was the thing, is that I could see how many of my colleagues were taking somebody's rejection, quote unquote, personally. Whereas from my perspective, it was like, I have no idea what they've got going on in the room where they're answering the phone. They could be desperately waiting for a piece of news. They could have just been having a massive argument. They could have been in the middle of dinner. There's so many different possibilities. So I learned fairly quickly to be robust and not take it personally. And I think without realizing it, that stood me in such good stead in life, let alone with the work that we do.
It's such a good strengthening, isn't it? Because how often is that somebody's biggest problem is their interpretation of what's happening, and that is it not one of the four agreements is not to take other people personally,
Yeah. Yeah. And funnily
which is
enough, I was talking with a client about this yesterday. Um,
Really?
yeah, and I actually recommended the 4 agreements. He did say to me, "Are you on commission? You always recommend books." It's because I know he's a reader and that he will take that information on board. But yeah, I think the 4 agreements is such a great book, and recognizing that the two of the agreements that I think are so helpful are the not making assumptions and not taking things personally.
Love those two.
Mm,
When I ask people a question and then they say, "Oh, I think," and hang on a second, I can do that myself. The thinking, the making stuff up, I've got that covered. I want to know what the facts are.
yeah,
Um, and so you were saying that you tried on different jobs. Well, I'm saying tried on. You said
it's kind of,
experimented.
yeah, it
To me,
is trying them
to me,
on.
it felt like you were wearing them to see it just like Goldilocks. That
Different
you were
porridges.
Goldilocksing with the different jobs, and then 2 years later you became a coach. And how did was this whilst you were married?
I got married in 2000, so I qualified as a coach in 2005. I got married in 2006. So it was whilst I was temping, um, that I was trying the jobs on. And I think what was so helpful with doing it is it because it was such a different context to the world I've been working in, it enabled me to see the stuff that I wasn't qualified on paper for. This sounds really boastful, but it is factual. Every temp job I had, they wanted to give me a full-time job.
Mm.
And it didn't matter whether I was working in data, whether I was working in the call center, whether it was in the children's nursery. The children's nursery, they were fighting to try and get me to stay on and train as somebody to work there with the children, which I would have loved to do if I could have done it my way. But I got into trouble because I made an empty nappy box and into a little bus. And I made a little bus stop and got the little 2-year-olds lined up, and I was taking them in the bus and pulling them around. And it wasn't a pre-qualified toy, so I wasn't allowed to do that. So
Oh,
yeah, I think I'd have
probably
got
the
into
best game
trouble.
they ever played.
They were still having a great time. I was having a great time, but yeah, we weren't allowed to do that. So then I went for counselling to try and help me with some of the issues that I had going on, and that just didn't work for me. It didn't resonate with where I was at. And again, long story short, ended up being offered some coaching. And through that coaching, the coach said to me, "Have you been reading personal development books?" And I'm like, "No, it's your job to fix me," which was absolutely my viewpoint at the time.
Mine right
Why?
now.
And he said, "It's just that you've been actually coaching me for the last 10 minutes. I think that you don't realize that you do this. Maybe you should go and look into it." And when I do meet anybody that I used to work with and tell them what they do now, the majority of them just start laughing because they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly what you used to do." But I hadn't obviously seen it because I didn't know it existed.
Yeah, yeah, you didn't know it's for. I mean, I didn't know what coaching was when I brainstormed all the things I'd love to do if I knew I couldn't fail, and it was a friend that I shared it with and said, "Oh, that's coach." And I said, "What's that?" I didn't know who Tony Robbins was. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
embarrassed. But I said, then where did that take you? So you
As
trained to be
in,
a coach.
so I trained to be a coach. Well, it was during, and again, I started to train to be a coach, but I had zero intention of running it as a business because I didn't know that people did that. I just thought this was something that you trained in. That was it. So I was at that point still temping, but I was also doing Reiki sessions with people, um, and then training to be a coach. And as you know, when you train to be a coach, you have to have case studies. And unbeknownst to me, my case studies were referring me to other people. So I got a couple of phone calls with people saying, "Can we book in with you? And how much do you charge?" And it was a little bit like, "I get to charge money for this? This is like, no, it's too easy. Surely you don't get paid to do something you love in this way," which is really ironic considering I was getting paid to do theatre and I loved the theatre for most of the time. Um, so I did start doing that, and then I got invited to go and do a couple of schools workshops, and then before I knew it, I thought, I better register this as a business then and kind of get on with it. And still didn't really. The thing that I often say is that I didn't start my business started me.
Yeah, it's a good way of
And I
looking at
think it's very true. I really do, because there's so much that I do now that I never realized I was capable of. Never realized. And I think that that's one of the things that, by trying on different jobs, by taking on different experiences, I think that that's what it really does for me. But I think many people, it doesn't matter what it is go and have a go at that thing, not because you're going to do that thing, but you will learn something from it about yourself. And most of us are so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for.
And it's interesting, just going back to, was it honor?
Honor,
Honor?
yeah, honor.
Honor. Um, we do need somebody that sees something in us, that when we're busy getting on, and just getting by even sometimes, and looking at where we need to be better, that sometimes we just need somebody that says, do you know this about you? And my spiritual mentor, Peggy Dillon, calls it, I remember when I was really struggling once, I was in a bit of a crisis of confidence, or confidence crisis, and I was telling her what was going on. She said, I will hold you in my heart till you can be back in yours. And while she wasn't physically doing anything different, knowing that somebody was either seeing me as I was or holding me in that energetic way it's just life changing, isn't it? And her way of working is that, every human being needs a spiritual mentor that holds belief in them until they've got the belief themselves. And just the value of honor in that moment. She said that she was the right person at the right time, dropping into your heart and leaving that
I
bread
think
trail.
that I think the thing that was so amazing was I think we got picked up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to go on this trip. She wasn't who I was traveling around Peru with. I literally got on the van, sat at the back of the van with her. So met her at 5 o'clock that morning, and by 9 o'clock that morning, she'd made that statement. So it was in a very, very short period of time that she saw me in a completely new way, that I was open to hearing, even though it was a bit of a moment, because I immediately, the moment at that point in my life, so I would have been in my late 20s, anyone who had a university education, anyone who was earning what I would have classed as a significant amount of money, I just immediately put them on a pedestal and assumed that they were better than me, they knew more than me, etc., more intelligent than me. And the way she and I interacted was just this total leveler. And I suddenly saw that in a very different way, which I think then started the journey of me recognizing how frequently I was putting myself in that less than place. Other people weren't. My thinking was saying I am inferior in comparison to whoever that was and however they were. And I think that having a conversation with somebody in that way just completely leveled things out. And we're still in contact to this day. So she knows that I talk about her in this way, and the impact that she had on my life in that moment.
Do you think that life drops angels in our path? Like, because when you're telling the story, how I translate it is, you weren't meant to be traveling with her. You were on your journey, and then this lady is dropped in, and she stayed in your life, but she was dropped in, gave the message you were meant to hear, to realign you, or to say what's next. Do you believe in, I don't know if the word's, I don't know another phrase for it, but like divine intervention or angels, how would you describe it?
So when I studied in India in 2008 and in 2011, one of the processes they take you through has got a number of mantras that you say, and you say each of them, I can't remember how many times now, before you move on to the next one. And one of those mantras is everything's happening automatically.
Automatically.
Automatically. And what I I remember how much I hated that mantra. Out of all of them, I think there's 12 in total. That one for me was just like that. That means I've got no choice. That means it's all predetermined, etc., etc. But actually, the more I've sat with it, and the more I've seen moments like just before Christmas, I parked the car in town in a place I never normally park, which meant all I was doing was walking from there to the office to collect something and then go back home again. That was the plan. And I never normally park there. I parked in a different car park, therefore walked a different way to the office, and en route bumped into one of my close friends who was not in a great space.
Mm.
She had to go and do something very quickly, but then that gave us the opportunity to have a coffee. So to me, when that mantra of everything's happening automatically, it's the automatic that's putting us in each other's path. I then think from there we have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's always, and I do think it's interesting you use the word angel, because I can't remember what it was. It was tail end of last year. I was walking home with the dog, and I got to one of the main crossroads, and it's a very busy one with pedestrians as well as cars. And there was a young lady, I'm going to say a student because they're usually students around that area, and she was sobbing her heart out. Absolutely. This was about October, November time, like really big tears. So I just stood very calmly, and I tried to make eye contact with her. And the moment I got eye contact with her, I just mouthed, "Are you okay?" And she kind of smiled, but was obviously like shoulders going, crying. It was big crying. It wasn't just a little bit of crying. So when the traffic lights changed, instead of crossing the road, I waited for her to come over. And I just went up to her and I said, "Would you like a hug?" And she fell into my arms and just absolutely sobbed. And she kept saying, "I'm okay, I am okay," and was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And then she stepped back and I said, "My name's Jules. This is my dog, Finn." And then she introduced herself. And I said, "Is there anything I can do for you right now?" And she looked at me, and she genuinely looked at me and went, "Are you an angel?"
Oh.
Which is why I'm telling this story. And I started laughing and went, "No, I'm real."
I'm a real
And
angel.
and she just sobbed for a little bit more. And I said to her, "Where are you going?" She said, "I'm going to a friend's." And I said, "If you want to come to my house for a cup of tea, I live around the corner. You're more than welcome to. I'm more than happy to give you my phone number if you need somebody to talk to." And she went, "Honestly, I'm fine. You cannot believe what that hug has given me." And that I've never seen her again. And I think Honor was that for me. I was that for this young lady. I think we all have the opportunity to do that. And sometimes I think we think it has to be a big thing, but it might be. I think that moment with Honor and I was because of where we were. We had nothing else distracting us. So we could do nothing other than be present with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's why she saw something in me. And I think that then, and that's what I mean about, to me, people are put in our way, but how we converse with them and whether we're present with them, that's down to us. That's our free will, I think, to be able to do that interaction. But that person is put there. Where do we go from here? And also I could have heard what she said and went, "Yeah, she doesn't know me," and dismissed it. So I do think that people are put in our paths, momentarily and or for a lifetime as well.
And I'm just thinking about in these, well, I think it's always been important, but in these times, how healing it is to be actually seen. Where somebody stops everything, stops the world, and just sees somebody without their filter of ego or fear, and is just totally present with that person and just sees them, and they feel understood or accepted or seen. Um, just the need. I think we've got a greater need for it now than ever. What's your thought?
Yeah, I do. And again, at exactly that same crossroads, I have seen, it was a young guy. This was a couple of years ago. and he was sobbing his heart out. And I mean, he was very audible with it as well. But my sense at that point was not to stop. So I just kept an eye on him. He crossed the road safely and got to the other side. And it was like, I didn't have the same, I'm going to say compulsion. I don't know if that's the right word, to stop for him in the same way, for no other reason than it just didn't seem needed, I suppose. Whereas for her, it seemed, I I think I think there was a maternal thing that came over me, which is, that if I'd have had a child, she or he would have probably been around her age by now. And I think that there was a maternal part on me that I just wanted to go, are you okay? And I also think that I thought about this a lot. I don't know what your thoughts on this are, Lisa, but I think also that people are put in our paths for us to learn something about ourselves and potentially to give ourselves of that age something that we maybe didn't have.
Mm.
I know, weirdly, because I live on the same street now that I did when I was in my mid to late 20s.
Really?
Different house, but same street.
Yeah.
And I know there were numerous times when I walked that route and was crying, and no one stopped me. No one. So I think that there is a part of me that potentially thought, that's me from, years ago. Let me now hug her and go, it's okay.
Yeah, it's
I know that's
almost
not
like
true.
healing
It's
your own.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of. I think that with clients as well, some of the clients that I get, I'm like, this is me. This is a conversation for me to have
Well,
had with 10 years ago.
how often though do you find yourself um, giving some mentoring, some advice to someone, and you think, actually, that's really good advice for me right now, as though the mind thinks I'm going to find a way for you to hear this. And, quite often I've been in conversations with people, giving them some tips, advice, or mentoring, thinking, actually, I'm going to write that down and do it myself. That's a brilliant action plan for me. Do you ever
Yeah.
find that?
Yeah,
The worst.
one of the practices that I clocked quite early on after coaching was to stop, when their client had left, was stop and write down any of the questions that I'd asked them that I remembered. It wasn't like a memory test, but what do I remember? And then sit and write my answers out to those questions, because I'm like, exactly, there's something, especially when I don't know if you discovered this as a coach. I suspect you have, knowing you, is that there at the beginning when you learn, it's kind of clunky and you're trying to remember what good questions to ask or what tool to use or what model to use or anything like that. But the longer you do it, you kind of let all of that go and know that the right question or word or metaphors just falls into your lap. Is the only way I can describe
Yeah.
it. And so I think that sometimes that's where I don't think it's the mind. I think it's I don't even know what word I would use. Inner wisdom, I suppose. Uh, that it just that comes to the fore, and that's where I'm like, oh, is there anything from that I need to be aware of that I wasn't aware of in that prior to that conversation? So I think it's there. I mean, how many times do people say, I'm good at giving advice, but I don't listen to it,
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of what job they do?
Yeah. Or even people that ask for your thoughts, you give them, they say, yeah, yeah, I know all of that, but they're more into taking in knowledge and less about applying action, as though change happens from knowledge. Um, so just on the being seen front, um, are you finding with people or even clients, I know your clients are people,
Just to clarify.
yeah, that so much healing takes place by just holding space for them without and the complete acceptance of who they are in front of you and them being seen for all that they are and all that they can be is, before you even open your mouth, just so powerful for them, and that it's now more than ever before.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the busyness and the distractedness and the lack of awareness that most people are being in on a day-to-day basis means that conversations, be them between loved ones, be them between friends, be them between work colleagues, they're not connected in the way that they could be. So I think that there's two things really with clients in particular. I think that the practice of giving them the opportunity. I've just had a client written a testimonial for me, and she said something along the lines of, "I've never felt so safe with someone to be able to say anything and know that it's okay."
Mm.
And I work very hard with that in the first meeting of somebody, let alone before we even start a coaching program together. And sometimes that does mean that I expose, quote unquote, myself. I don't mean literally, because that would be wrong and unethical. Hilarious for some people, I'm sure. But if it means I need to share something of myself in order for them to understand, look, I get it.
Yeah.
I really get it. And this is my experience, then I will do that. But also, I work very hard for them to know that there is zero judgment. I mean, I know some stuff about some of my clients and their life that their loved ones don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a, oh, look at me, isn't that great? It just goes to show that if you are really truly present with somebody, they will open up. But they've got to be able to know that they can without there being any judgment. So I think that's one thing. And I think then on the back of that, what they then start to realize, and I think the two are sort of intertwined, is that they realize I'm listening beyond their words.
Yes.
Um, because I will often get the sense that something else is being said, not being said. I really don't even know how to explain that. But the more conversations, I think the more conversations you have with people, I've started with I've just signed up a client this week, for example, and the conversation that we had in our initial chemistry call, I said to her, and this is one of my jokey phrases with clients, is I'm really sorry to tell you, you're absolutely normal. And she kind of looked horrified. And I said, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard pretty much word for word the phrase that you've just said in the nearly 20 years that I've been coaching now. And you can see this weight just suddenly go, oh, off her shoulders. And that realization of, oh, it's not just me. Therefore, and then it opens up a different kettle of fish. And I think that's seeing that beyond can make such a big difference, I think, of recognizing there's so much more behind that. Let's look behind that and see where that takes us.
Mm. And what's the difference in people, do you think, since COVID and people working from home, um, that's showing up in terms of their needs that they don't know that they need? So, COVID, you restricted us all, isolated us, work from home, and then people are now wanting to stay working from home, even though they know it's better for them to go into the office for their connection and their self-belief and their comfort zone expanding. What are you seeing that's showing up in their needs that
I
wasn't there before?
I think in some senses it's exposing stuff. So it's exposing how much they can isolate themselves, and that can have really great benefits because it means you can crack on and be productive and get shit done. But it also can expose that distraction. It can also expose the disconnection, and therefore then any insecurities that may be hovering around underneath that are coming to the surface. And I think there's this bigger mask that's gone on. I think that there's this the veneers thickened. And I always look to encourage, doesn't matter what the conversation I'm in, whether it's a one-on-one or a group, look to help people go, you don't have to do that. You don't have, it's okay for you to be sad, uncomfortable, annoyed, frustrated, but let's look at what's really going on rather than just put a smile on, everything's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And I think that we're in this icky, weird transitional state from, because the world changed so much 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it will never, I think there are still some people that are hankering for it to go back to normal, whatever the hell that was, but it will never do that. And I think that's a good thing. And we're in this liminal space between two things. We've left where we were, but we don't really know what's next.
If we're on the
And that,
shore.
yeah, yeah. So it's this, what's going on here? And I think that that's creating a great amount of uncertainty for people, myself included. And it's being able to, I was going to say navigate that, but I don't even mean that. What I mean is be comfortable with the discomfort of the not knowing. And that's something that isn't spoken about in the business world very often, isn't spoken about in any or many of the sectors. And yet it is something, is what, we don't know where this conversation was going to go. That's it.
With a trust. I was talking to a company yesterday that wants to book me for a team day. And one of the things I said was, she was sharing with me about the team and how they have got a hybrid of working from home and being in the office, and we insist that they come in the office for 2 days a week and for their own mental wellness. And I had said, she said, on these days they like to know exactly what we're doing at every part of it. And I said, well, I'm going to encourage you not to share that, but to say it's a personal development day for personal growth. I said, because their minds are going to rule out anything that doesn't sound familiar. They're going to, they've not yet been expanded into. And I was sharing with her how much learning we used to do by modeling other people. You'd sit at your desk thinking, oh my God, I don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, but Barbara's good at it. So next time I see Barbara, I'm going to watch how she does it. Or overhear somebody on the phone. I learned so much from listening to how other people do it. Therefore, I also didn't know that I didn't know how to do it until I heard somebody else doing it, thinking, oh, that's good. I'd like to do it like that. Or I am definitely not doing it like that. So that landed badly. But if you're left at home trying to work your way through it, quite often I'm finding these days people don't want to say, I don't know how to do something, because they've got job insecurity, or they feel that they should know how to do it, and that in some way they're letting somebody down by asking the question. And what I know from 100% of leaders that I speak to, they're really happy for people to say, I don't know how to do something, can you
Yeah.
tell me? But are you noticing how the staying at home is making people very hesitant about what they step into, and how are you helping them step into what they're hesitant about?
Well, I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of of not only the unknown, but the kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about the assumptions and what we make up, and the impact, and then what we then attempt to navigate that. We're trying to resolve this imagined horror story in our head, which has got zero correlation to actually what's going on right in front of us. And I think we don't realize just how much that what's in our head is what's causing the problem. It's actually not what's in the external world. So one of the main things that I've got a couple of tools that I go through with clients, that to me it really is all about just tell me the fact. What is the fact that we're actually dealing with? One of my clients yesterday had a little I've been working with him for ages. This is the one I keep referencing the books to. And he said to me, he said, I've just had a realization. I'm delivering this presentation tomorrow to 18 people, and I've been screwing myself over trying to make sure that every slide meets every individual's needs. And what are they going to come? He said, I've just realized I've been trying to think, what are they thinking? And I don't even know what I'm thinking. Yeah. Therefore, I'm tripping myself up. And I'm like, exactly. And I think that to me, when that's what's happening when people are working from home and they're isolating, they're only communicating via whether it's Teams or whatever it is they're not seeing that those typewritten words, when they read that text, their thinking is implying an intonation, it's implying a tone, because Barbara always sounds like this, or Bob always says it in that way, rather than recognizing it's just words on a screen, and it's the thinking that's putting the interpretation there, not anything else. So that's what's tripping us up. So there's a lot of, for me, about let's look at what actually is there, the facts, versus what is being made up. But I do talk a lot to people about fear as well, and the difference between primal fear and psychological fear, and how much that can trip us over, and it's just not helpful. But
Mm.
I think that hybrid working, I think it. I think it's a difficult one, because I don't think there's a hard and fast rule that it should be hybrid and should be X number of days. But I think again, organizations are finding their way, people are finding their way. We're still in this, what actually works? Because I think the novelty of being at home and being able to chuck another wash on, or being able to nip round the block and, go and get something sorted, or pick the kids up, or whatever it is, I think the novelty of that is still there. But actually, the impact of working from home and not being able to learn from somebody else because they're there, or not being able to overhear that conversation and realize, hang on, you're just about to do something and I'm already doing it. You don't need it. I've got it. I
Yeah.
think people are just starting to see the implications where that's concerned.
Mm. And what would your wisdom be to anybody that's got that feeling, that inkling of, I know I'm meant for more, but they've yet to
Mm.
action it, but they've just, maybe it's at this point, it's just a feeling that they've maybe noticed other people that are getting on with their life and making life changes, and in them it's stirred that I know I'm meant for more, but I'm not yet doing anything or thinking anything other than I've got the feeling. What would your wisdom be?
I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing what I did, which is chuck everything in, and not that it was a bad thing for me, but I think that for many people that's not a helpful way to do it. I think I can be a little bit jump in the swimming pool and then go, oh, this is the deep end, right? Okay, how do I swim? Sometimes that works really well. Sometimes it doesn't. I think playing around with stuff, so testing stuff out, going and being somewhere for a period of time, a longer period of time, see if that's right for you, taking a sabbatical. I often talk with clients that are thinking about changing careers. It's like, well, can you go and do a work experience like you would have done when you were 15, 16 years old with one of your mates, just for a couple of days to see what they do? If they're working from home, don't do that, because it's going to end up in carnage.
Mm.
But,
Messy.
but because I think that it's just as helpful to try something and go, ugh, not that, as it is to try something and go, oh, yeah, that. So I think trialing things, if it's from a work perspective, if it's, I know I've got a friend who's going through challenge in relationship. For her, she went and lived on her own for a month. That was one of the agreements. She just wanted to see, she'd never ever lived on her own and wanted to see what that was like. So rented somewhere for a month and went and did that. So I think it's that experience. There are going to be some people who it is right to just cut and jump and go, yep, this is it. I need to just chuck myself in at the deep end. I think for the majority of people, though, trialing things, testing things out, because then there will come a point when you're like, yeah, I'm ready to do this now. And if not, go get the support of coach, mentor, advocate, friend, support, whatever it is, because there's many of us that have done it. Many of us have just gone, there's something else. I know that there's something else. I don't know what that else is, but I'd love to explore it. So have those conversations.
Mm. I remember when I was 16, I wanted to be a vet when I was a kid. Jules and I are dog lovers, and we particularly love our own dogs. And I went and did my school placement at a vet's, and I was absolutely adamant that I would be a vet, but this wonderful black lab came in with a great big growth on its side, and I was allowed to sit in its surgery. But as they'd shaved around the growth and it lived, and then they did the first incision, I fainted.
Mm.
So I knew that couldn't be for me. I was way too empathetic with dogs, but I knew I wanted to care. I had this real caring nature, and I knew I wanted to do something that was really caring. So I thought, right, well, I'll be a nurse. This was after I'd wanted to be an actress, and my dad had said that I could sleep with the directors. So I couldn't say that's all right. So I'd gone in, followed the passion of vets. Then I thought, right, well, I'll be a nurse. And I did actually do weekends at Clifton Hospital where I live, that's now been knocked
Oh.
down, on the psychiatric wards. And I did go and volunteer my time. But what I realized was when I got home, I had a splitting headache. And I went to pre-nursing college, and I realized at the beginning of all of that, I think I need to work with well people.
Mm.
So I was just, and I knew I needed to work with people. And when we were young, it was being a nurse or a doctor or something like that. And I'm so glad I tried them on, as you're saying, did Goldilocks. I'm so glad I tried them on, because I would have leapt right into something that wasn't quite a fit for me. And coaching only came around, what, 25 years ago, 30 years ago? It'd
Yeah,
been
pretty
around about
much.
10 years when we started. We're ancient. We've been doing it 20 years,
Yes. It's mad.
isn't
It's
it?
mad. But I think that's the point though, and I think that when, especially when people get older, we kind of give the permission to young people to go try it, experiment. But then when we get older, we're like, oh, I've got responsibilities, can't possibly go and try stuff. Yes, you can. You can still go and try stuff. Volunteering is a brilliant way. Volunteer at the dog's home. Here, working with kids, volunteer in a school, because it will so give you the opportunity. I'm laughing because one of my friends went and volunteered because they thought they wanted to go and train and be a teacher. So they volunteered in a school and came out a week later and went, yeah, that's not going to happen.
That's a
But
big
that's
cross.
great. Yeah, exactly. But that's just as helpful to know, rather than just going, oh yeah, I want to be a teacher, investing that money to go and do a PGCE, getting to the end of it and then going into a school. That's just not helpful for anybody.
Just going back to the assumptions part, I think lots of people assume they're not going to like something, or that something's going to be difficult. So they rule it out rather than trying it on for free. And
Yeah.
it really is. Um, I would have assumed when I was employed and part of a sales team, and I was always in the middle of everything, what I would say I was popular. Somebody watching this might be saying, we pulled it off. But I was always around people, and I could have assumed that leaving working for a big company where we've got an IT company, where everything you needed was supplied for, expense account, petrol card, company car, you name it. Then for me to go and set up my own business and be completely by myself, apart from the clients that were seen on a one-to-one, I could have assumed that's so different to my life. I'm not going to like it, but actually, and thankfully I didn't. I realized I was quite at home being being at home, working for myself and having my own autonomy. But if you were to guess, you wouldn't have guessed that it would have worked for me. So I think that's amazing advice, to just go and try these things on.
And I fully appreciate that for some people that, there is the financial factor that needs to go in there. But that I think this day and age, there's always ways. The only one thing that I would say to recognize is that it takes time sometimes, to really get into something. So if I went and, volunteered somewhere and I really hated it after the first day, just give it a little bit longer, because that might just be, this is so new
Yeah,
that actually I don't like it. So
yeah.
give it a little bit longer than that to just test it out and see whether it fits or not. And I think sit down with those that can support you and explain why it is that you want to try all this thing, so that if you've got some purpose behind it, even if it is, I just want to see what else I'm capable of or what else is out there, then give them the reasoning for it so that they've got the buy-in as well. Because I think that that's what we don't do sometimes. We think we're so on our own rather than, no, 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 these are my reasonings for doing it. How best can you help me? I think is it's a really important thing to do. But don't, I think in this world of one click and you got your Amazon delivery at your front door, I think we can very easily forget that sometimes it takes us personally a bit longer to settle in and experience something and know whether it's right for us or not.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Because so often the joy is only just around the corner and we're about to write it off. I love that. I love that. Jules, thank you so much. If you had one favorite quote or your favorite wisdom just to end this with, what would it be? I've put you on the spot because this is not in the brief, is it?
It's not in the brief, but it's okay
You're a
because
pro.
I have I'm a pro. Um, I think this is pertinent to what we've been saying actually. So for me, I have for many years specialized in understanding confidence and what it truly is versus what people think it is. And one of the quotes that made such a significant difference for me is by somebody called Pete McIntyre. And the quote is, confidence isn't about always being right. It's about not fearing to be wrong. And I think it's a very pertinent quote for what we've just been saying, because I think the thing that people think that stops them from doing stuff is confidence, but actually it's because you're trying to do it right rather than just have a go.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a perfect quote to end on. Thank you so much, lovely.
Thank you for
I,
inviting me.
I can't wait to, I get to watch and listen to this all again, so I can't wait to watch it. I think our self-esteem's in good nick. Thank you, Jules.
Thank you.